This is Robert Core. I'm spending some time this week working on the wave animation that I've been working on in Clip Studio Paint on the iPad. And I'm going to go through a little bit, walking through some more of the features of Clip Studio Paint and animating on the iPad, as well as talking a little bit about the wave animation that I made. This is my character Savannah from my short film Europa, which is currently in progress. Hope to show some work of that in the coming weeks. Right now, I want to just break down how I did this wave animation. I think the first thing you'll notice is there's a lot of layers. So what we'll do is we'll look at the main line layer, and what you can do is you can hold down on the eyeball and you can switch to hide. So if you want to hide that layer, that's not exactly what I want to do. Hide all other tracks. And then what this is going to do is it's going to show you the base animation. It's a little hard to see because I have it on that color. Alright, so here's the loop. To hit play, we just go over here. And right now it's displaying the frame rate in the side. It's at 24 frames per second on 2s. So I wanted some nice fluid like overlapping action in this, and a little bit of softness in the collar and the hair, and to move the fingers around a little bit. To save time, I didn't want to redraw the eyes so much. So what I did is I actually used the tools, what is it called? It has some tweening ability. So let's add that on. Okay, that's just a fill. Alright. So yeah, so when we put on the eyes, you'll see how that looks. And so the eyes are moving with the body, but they're actually separate. And what I did with that was I activated a transform. So we can disable the transform and you can see what happens. So the eyes themselves are just a loop of 3 frames. You can see here 1, 2, 3. That shows the number of frames. The reason why I do 3 frames is it creates what's called a boil. It keeps the look of the animation alive, makes it look a little bit more interesting than if it's not moving. I wanted this to kind of have a rough indie feel, so I'm not really so concerned with making it look commercial ready, but I still wanted to keep it consistent. So in Clip Studio Paint, what you can do is you can turn on by clicking over here, this little tool, which looks like a little moving piece of paper. And what that does is it allows you to set position frames. You use this option up here, and you see what I'm going to get. Sorry, keep dragging the whole thing. You get this bounding box. You can see the whole bounding box move. Now there's no actual trick to this. I actually had to go in and manually place them, and there's a little bit of slippage of the eye. I didn't do it absolutely perfectly, but here we could just try. I can make another keyframe just to show you what happens. Oops, I moved the body. Let's go back to the eye. Shoot. Try one more time. Yeah, so you can see the eye moved. And what it did is it created another keyframe in here. So you can see it moves around. We are going to undo that, because I'm pretty happy with the animation. And so let's add these back piece by piece. So after I did the eyes, one of the next things I did was I began working on the fill. So basically I just usually I work on a flat color, and then use that as a way to crop in any shading, or I use multiply or some other kind of layer mode to get the shading on it. In this case I used a multiply. I also duplicated the eyeball and then painted in fill into the eye, which now also tracks with the eye. What I kind of find unbelievable is that all this can be done on an iPad. And then basically what I did is I started doubling up the line. So I just duplicated the line and blurred it. And that kind of gives it this less refined digital feel. as you can see, kind of softens the line a little bit. It also darkens everything. So the animation we end up with, let me get out of this transform mode. Oops. So I disconnected my timeline. If that happens, you can drag it back to the bottom and reconnect it. And here, let me show you this. So this is without any shading. So now I'm going to start laying in some of the other features. So the next thing I needed to do was I wanted to build up this chromatic aberration kind of shade. And the way I do that is I do cyan and magenta. They're both multiplied over each other. Here you can see if I open up the layer panel over here. Oh, one of the other really nice things about this program is this sub view. You could post your model sheets in here and they stay persistent all the time. So you can sample colors from it, you can check your reference, many other things. So on the cyan layer, I have it set to multiply. And then what I do is I duplicate the cyan, repaint it as magenta, and then blur it. And that kind of gives it this shadow that's not quite gray, has a bit of light to it, and kind of becomes a little pink on the edges, kind of giving it a little bit of warmness in the shadow. It's something I learned a while ago from this illustrator that I hired on a project named Ben Caldwell. He's really amazing. And he kind of did that and I kind of swiped it. But that is a really nice feature. So then the next thing I did is I put in a shine on the eyes. There's no trick. Once again, manually added frame by frame. I then wanted to sign it and I wanted to have a boil on my signature, so I put that in the corner, and you'll see if I scrub that, it moves a little bit. So basically everything is just a keep alive. And then here, let me minimize the other part. So the next part I'm adding is I threw in a background, which is also animating. Sorry, lost it again. This program is really nice on the iPad, but it still suffers from dealing with being a small tablet. So, and then the next one is the highlight, which is what I'm currently working on. So you'll see how that is working. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue working on the highlight. So we don't need all of this frames. What's nice is too is you can use your hand to move the panel around. Alright, so you'll see that frames, these early frames, have them cropped, and the later ones that they're not. So I'll show you how to do that briefly, and then as soon as I finish this. So the color I was using was yellow, and I was using this brush. So I quickly want to check to see what the previous frame looked like. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to color up here. And then I can check the previous frame. Alright, so I have a bit more on the shoulder. I have a little triangle here on her chest. And basically I'm not worrying too much about overlap at this point. I just want to approximate in the fill. I'll show you why in a moment. So I know there's also additional on her belly. And then that should be everything. Just check to see if there's any pops. Alright, so the reason why I did that is, and the reason why I didn't bother filling it, is that I can actually use one of the other layers below. So this is frame 11, so I'm going to go down to the fill layer and frame 11. And if I use my finger and click on it, I can go select layer, selection from layer, create selection. And what that's going to do is it's going to create a body form for the her whole body. And then I'm going to use the explode outside Actually, I think that's the wrong one. It's one of these. Oh, you know why? Because I have to switch to the right layer. There, now it crops it. And I can do the same thing with 10. Click here, selection from layer, create selection, and adjust the selection. Go back up to the cell layer, and then explode it. Go back to 9. It's a little easier to use your finger for this. Selection from layer, create selection. Go back up here, and then explode that one. And do the same thing with 8. Selection from layer. Didn't do it. I think I got interrupted with an autosave. Selection from layer, create selection. Okay, did it. And blow it away. And 7. Create selection from layer, create selection. So one thing you'll begin to realize is how absolutely tedious this is. It's kind of one of the reasons why for most professional work I still rely on Harmony, because it gives you functions that are a lot simpler than this, like cropping, or I mean pretty much any other animation program has some sort of masking that would let you handle this. There might be a way to do this. Feel free and yell at me in the comments and tell me I'm wrong. I like finding out that I'm wrong and learning new things. I actually decided to pick up this software because a student in my class was making her thesis project on it, and I wanted to be able to help her if she had any problems with doing her animation, and at least I'd be able to speak to any problems she was having. Okay, let's just do a selection from layer, create selection. I think this is the last one that I have. And then blow that away. Okay, so here we can play it back now. Oops, we want to get rid of the selection. Go edit. Actually, you don't. There's no deselect. It's just this little button right there. So right now you'll see the shadow kind of hangs longer. Let's just create an empty key so you don't see it. And that is it. So I have to go now and finish this. And through the magic of editing, here is the final piece. So my goal is to actually put this on Instagram, so I'm going to export this as a movie. So I'm going to go File, Export Animation, and I'm going to do Movie. I'm going to call this... What did I call the previous one? Animation Test 1. So this will be Animation Test 2. O2. And then we save. And that's what I want. Then you get into this dialogue to the movie and you want to share it because we want to get it out of this program. So I am going to save the video, which will save it to my roll. And that's it. So if you like what you saw, please subscribe and click the bell for notifications. Thanks and have a good week.